Guilty of capital murder. The judge announcing the verdict just minutes ago.
And here's how it happened.
Cause number 154-6111, the state of Texas versus Antonio Armstrong Jr. We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment. It's signed the foreperson of the jury.
Thanks for joining us. Joining you on air with breaking news from the A.J. Armstrong trial. As you heard, a jury has reached that verdict, finding A.J. Armstrong guilty of murdering his parents while they slept in their home back in July of 2016.
As you may know, this was the third trial for the 23-year-old. The previous two ending in hung juries. Armstrong was 16 years old when the murders took place. All right, let's send it over to Grace White. She joins us live from the courthouse right now. Hey, Grace.
I was inside the courtroom just moments ago when that verdict was read. It was 3:35 to be exact. Remember, this is A.J. Armstrong's third murder trial. The jury has been deliberating this case since Tuesday. We counted about 10 and a half hours of deliberations. The courtroom was crowded here this afternoon, and A.J. Armstrong's wife could be heard audibly crying as this verdict was read. The judge in this case read A.J. Armstrong's sentence. That will be 40 years in prison, and after that, he is eligible for parole. We're expecting the Armstrong family to speak and also prosecutors in this case in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Grace White. There are so many crews out there covering this high-profile case, a case that we've been watching for 7 years now.
Yeah, A.J. Armstrong sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. That was an automatic sentence for him since Armstrong was 16 years old at the time of those crimes.
And has this happened today? You have to bring up the news from yesterday, which was this illegal bombshell, if you will, which is A.J. Armstrong's team suing the city because of this blood evidence that was admitted in this trial. They're saying it was planted on A.J. Armstrong.
But of course, the jury did not get to hear that. They were sequestered and did not hear the news of that lawsuit that was filed against the city on behalf of Armstrong. But as we saw in the courtroom, A.J. Armstrong was sentenced, showing no emotion. But we did have our reporters in the courtroom, like our Grace White and Adam Bennett, who did say that his wife was seen crying in the courtroom. Also, that she is the mother of his child. Of course, his first two trials ended in mistrials. So this was obviously very emotional the third time around, as we saw a lot of his family rallying and supporting him during this trial.
All right, I don't know if it's possible for us to go back to our reporter outside the courtroom now, Grace White. Hey, Grace, can you hear us out there? Can you describe the scene for us?
Ron, it was a very crowded courtroom. It's a very crowded hallway. If you take a look around, you can see all of the people here waiting for the Armstrong family to speak. We're also told that the Harris County District Attorney, she was inside the courtroom when that verdict was read. We're expecting her and prosecutors to speak about this verdict and this third trial for A.J. Armstrong in just a few minutes. Very crowded down here.
All right, thank you so much, Grace. Yeah, news conferences are expected, and we are expected to hear from the District Attorney, Kim Ogg, to hear her thoughts on all this. Obviously a victory for the District Attorney's office.
Absolutely. This trial included 40 hours of testimony. They heard from some 31 witnesses over 11 days. As we have been following this trial, the closing arguments on both sides very intense, talking about mountains of evidence. And we're talking about the 911 call, issues with the alarm and the records pertaining to the home alarm, text messages, cell phone records, all of those things considered. In this case, though, the prosecution actually focused on three events that happened before Antonio Sr. and Don Armstrong were killed.
And we'll have to see what happens with this lawsuit now. And we'll be talking to our legal expert, Carmen Rowe, a little bit later this afternoon to see if the lawsuit that was filed yesterday will have any impact on this case going forward.
Because appeal, yeah.
with appeals likely. There's video of A.J. Armstrong earlier this week around the courtroom.
And talking about the 3 points that the prosecution pointed out in this case, one was that Armstrong Jr. had actually shot his father's gun through a pillow and a blanket with a bullet going through the floor of his bedroom. That is a point that the prosecution wanted to make to the jury. Another one was that about 2 days before the deaths of his parents, he had poured gasoline into a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and then set fire outside his parents' bedroom. And a third thing that was brought up of note was the alarm records, which was a point in the first two trials about alarm records proving the victims and their two youngest children were the only ones inside that home. So those were the three big points that the prosecution brought and presented to the jury in this case. And obviously, evidence and facts that weighed on the jury as they came back with that guilty sentence for Antonio Armstrong Jr. just moments ago.
And we're looking at video from, I believe, earlier today or yesterday of A.J. Armstrong's family that supports him. This was this morning, actually, talking about the lawsuit against the city of Houston, saying that the blood evidence was planted, and their lawsuit against the city of Houston. Be curious to see how that will be affecting things in the future legally for A.J. Armstrong. You would think that his legal struggles are not over, that his legal team might have something to work with.
Absolutely. And of course, you saw his supporters there. This is a prosecutor in the courtroom in video from, I believe, during closing arguments, and another prosecutor there. But the defense and his supporters maintained and said that Josh Armstrong, AJ's brother, may have been responsible for the killings, sort of casting that doubt there for the jury, and noted the lack of forensic evidence that could place AJ at the scene of the shooting, and also said that blood from one of the victims that was found under a sticker on AJ's shirt on the day of the shooting was a result of cross-contamination. So obviously both sides fought very hard, but the jury had to weigh a lot before coming back with that unanimous verdict and that guilty verdict in this trial.
So if you're just joining us, the big news today, A.J. Armstrong guilty in the murders of his parents 7 years ago. The jury started deliberating yesterday afternoon. They resumed deliberations this morning around 9:30 or 10, and then probably about 30 or 45 minutes ago announced that they had a verdict. We gave you that verdict live on the air. A guilty verdict. There was no reaction from A.J. Armstrong sitting in the courtroom, but obviously an emotional day for his family. And I think we mentioned earlier that his wife was seen crying in the courtroom. A.J. has since gotten married since this crime from 7 years ago.
Absolutely. So our lead story today in the third capital murder trial for A.J. Armstrong, found guilty of murdering his parents back in 2016. We'll have much more on this verdict.
Thanks for watching. We appreciate you. Please subscribe.